Two boys vanished in 1992 while exploring a cave 2 months later. No one believed what turned up. When Marcus and Eli disappeared inside the Widow's Mouth cave, everyone thought they'd gotten lost. But 2 months later, when a local man named Michael reopened the trail, he found the entrance breathing like something alive. Inside, he swore he saw the boys standing in the dark, silent, still, their eyes glistening black like wet glass. By morning, Michael was gone too. And when the town sealed the cave again, people started hearing laughter under the ground, the kind that didn't sound human. No one goes near those woods anymore, because some say the cave didn't just take them, it gave something back. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. You ever get that feeling, like the world is mostly ordinary, and then one ordinary morning loosens at the seam? Rockford Ridge was one of those places where the seams showed first. A town stitched together with diner coffee, busted neon, and the kind of gossip that sat heavy on porches like humidity. Folks knew the hours the mill blew its whistle, who left for the city and never wrote back, and which kids could be trusted with a lawnmower, and which would vanish down a dirt path chasing something reckless. Marcus Green was reckless in a way that felt alive, not reckless for the sake of it. He had a way of leaning into edges, roads, cliffs, conversations, and listening for the story underneath. He walked like he kept a small flashlight in his pocket, even when it was daylight, and sometimes he did. Eli Bennett walked quieter, his shoulders a little hunched, as if conserving breath. Marcus talked. Eli watched. Together they moved like a single question, walking the backwoods and finding answers in things older people would call trouble. They were 16 and 15, summer before senior year, and the town thought of them as those boys, always a half step away from what the adults called safety. The Widow's Mouth was a name everybody used but nobody loved. A jagged yawn of limestone a mile beyond town, tangled with roots and old miners' carts rusted into the soil. When the light hits the rock in a certain way, locals swore the mouth looked like a woman with her head bowed, hence the name, and the stories that clung to it like mildew. Some said miners used to disappear there back when the mine still paid wages. Others told you about echoes that sounded like voices, even on windless nights. Kids told ghost stories to prove they weren't scared. Grown-ups crossed themselves. Marcus and Eli had been planning the Widow's Mouth for weeks, like you plan a dare. Maps folded in the back pocket, a rope borrowed from Marcus's uncle, a thermos of coffee that went cold before it left the cabin. They were not dumb. They had helmets and torches and the kind of bravado that passes for courage in teenagers. The thing about bravery, though, is it often smells like arrogance if you get too close. There were small scenes before the day that mattered, tiny human things that become heavy later. Marcus scribbling in a battered notebook, crossing out map to the hidden shaft and writing check Grady's shed. Eli tying his shoelace 3 times, slow and careful, as if the knot could anchor him to solid earth. Marcus's mother, Linda, on the back step, folding a dish towel and humming a hymn she didn't remember the words to. Old Tom at the bait shop, shaking his head when someone mentioned the cave. Let the boys be boys, he'd say, but his eyes watched the road. On the morning they disappeared, the town was hazy, heat already breathing up from the road. The sky looked like someone had rubbed a finger through a blue-grey painting. Marcus told his ma he'd be back before dark. Eli's mum made him a sandwich and slid it across the kitchen table without asking a question she didn't already know the answer to. The boys met near the gas station, clasped hands in a friendship that was almost a promise, then walked out past the last mailbox and into trees that swallowed sound. They didn't rush, that's important. If you tell the story later like they ran and vanished in a heartbeat, you're lying to yourself. They walked, they joked. Marcus with a grin that made him younger, Eli answering with a clipped laugh, stopping to look at a broken fence, to pick a stone that seemed to hum under his fingers, to bend and listen to the quiet. Little things. Marcus brushing dirt off his jeans, Eli checking the batteries in his torch and muttering, "Don't be an idiot, Marcus." A blackbird startled, and a woman across a yard called, "Watch yourselves," but not sharp, more like a general blessing sent after boys who would ignore it. They reached the Widow's Mouth around noon. The cave entrance lived in the shadow of old sycamores, its breath cool and wet against the heat. Rockford Ridge had always regarded caves like secrets you keep too long, necessary, dangerous, part of the town's teeth. The boys stood at the lips of darkness and did what people often do, measured it, joked about it, tested the edges. Marcus swept his flashlight inside and the cone of light caught old graffiti, boot prints, a rusted pick dangling like a hand. Eli knelt, cupped his palms to his mouth, and let out a long, slow whistle, the kind hunters make when they want the woods to answer. There was a moment, thin as a wire, when the world shifted. Not dramatic, not cinematic. The wind dropped a half-beat. Marcus tapped the cave wall, listened, and said, "Hear that?" A sound like a long, low sorrow answered from deeper in, and both boys went quiet at once. Marcus smiled, but it was the kind of smile that says we shouldn't be here, and yet we're here anyway. They moved in, torches slicing through the dark, the cave swallowing noise and giving them its own, the drip of water, the scrape of boot on stone, the soft faraway sound that might have been a voice. They didn't go far, 10 yards, 20. Time becomes soft inside a cave. Minutes stretch and press like damp cloth. Marcus found a narrow passage and wedged himself through into a shaft with old iron rails. Eli followed, shoulders ducked, breath fogging, the world outside a memory of light and distant town. They dropped an echo. Marcus called out, "What's up?" into the black, and it bounced back a dozen small, tired voices. He laughed, and the sound felt small and human in that big, indifferent place. No one saw them afterward. Not because something dramatic happened right then, but because the day continued in its small, stubborn way. Someone mowed a lawn, a dog barked, a lunch bell rang. The town's clock didn't abruptly stop. Marcus and Eli were there, breathing, walking deeper, thinking they were just another notch in the day. The last thing Linda remembered was his knocking twice on the door, a muffled goodbye. Old Tom later swore he saw them from his truck window, 2 specks at the cave mouth, talking and pointing like boys do. Then, nothing, a silence that takes its time, folds in and waits. By evening, when shadows grew teeth and streetlights blinked on, people realized the boys had not returned. Worry unkinked into alarm. Phones rang. Footsteps multiplied. Marcus's mum paced the kitchen like a clock without hands. Eli's dad drove Ethan. No, Eli. Name wrong at first because panic blisters memory. The town's gossip wheel spun faster, picking at small details, making them larger. Maybe they found a new tunnel, someone said, hopeful. Probably at Jerry's place, another answered. A neighbor whispered, "You know how those caves get." And the whisper wasn't a story anymore, it was a bone-deep dread. Search parties formed, at first neighbors with flashlights and the sheriff's deputy with a radio. People in Rockford Ridge had been through missing things before, lost dogs, lost trucks, a miner who never made it back one winter, but not 2 boys, not this close. The first night they searched, the widow's mouth gave back nothing but drafts and echoes and the faint smell of wet stone. They called for Marcus, they called for Eli. The cave answered, and its answer was the sound of their own voices coming back different, hollowed like coins paid for something no longer sold. When they left at dawn, the town wore a new face, wrung with fear, stitched with coffee grounds and hollow-eyed looks. Linda sat on the porch, dishes untouched beside her, and folded that hymn again like a talisman. Old Tom stood by the bait shop, hands in his coat pockets, and said, "They'll find 'em." But his voice was a thread, and the thread trembled. And that was the thing about the first night. Absence doesn't scream. It spreads patient and quiet, until everyone in town is listening for a sound the world has decided not to make. By the second morning, Rockford Ridge didn't wake up. It staggered. You could feel the exhaustion in the air, like the whole town had been holding its breath overnight and was now too afraid to exhale. Sheriff Lane stood beside his cruiser at the mouth of the Widow's Mouth cave, a thermos in one hand, his other hand kneading the back of his neck. He wasn't a bad man, just one used to smaller problems, bar fights, missing goats, noise complaints, not 2 missing boys swallowed by a hole in the earth. Volunteers gathered in a loose circle, farmers, teachers, even kids who had played baseball with Marcus and Eli. They looked at the cave like it was something alive. A few people muttered prayers under their breath. Others kept their eyes on the ground, like if they didn't look into it, it wouldn't look back. Sheriff Lane barked out assignments, voice echoing over the rocks. Team 1, you'll go through the south entrance. Team 2, sweep the ridge trail behind the tree line. Mark everything you find. He tried to sound in control, but his words wavered like radio static. By noon, the town's quiet routines, bakery ovens, laundry lines, the faint buzz of the gas station had all gone silent. Everyone was searching. Even Mrs. Carver, the old lady who usually kept to her porch with her cat, stood by the cave entrance, clutching her rosary. She whispered to old Tom, "Told you that cave's cursed. My brother went missing there in '62. Never found a trace." Old Tom grunted, spat into the dirt, and replied, "Hush, Martha. Don't start that again. Ain't no curse, just bad ground and dumb luck." But he didn't look her in the eyes when he said it. Rondry Thorther, the search parties carried ropes, lanterns and walkie-talkies that crackled with interference. The deeper they went, the stranger the cave became. The rock walls glistened, and some parts seemed to hum faintly, like an old generator running somewhere unseen. Air shifted temperature every few yards, warm, then icy, then still. Men left chalk marks on the walls to track their paths. Some marks disappeared when they circled back. Around 3 p.m., one group found Marcus's flashlight. It was lying upright, near a bend, beam still faintly glowing, though it had been almost 30 hours since he vanished. The batteries should have been dead. Sheriff Lane stared at it for a long time, then pocketed it without a word. The volunteers exchanged uneasy looks but said nothing. When night crept in again, reporters from Lexington showed up, cameras flashing, microphones shoved into faces. They asked the same cruel question. What were they doing in there? As if curiosity was a crime. Linda Green, Marcus's mother, refused to speak. She just sat by the sheriff's truck, clutching her son's notebook to her chest. Pages full of sketches and scribbles fluttered in the breeze. On one page was a drawing of the widow's mouth, marked with little arrows and one faint note in blue ink. Voices only when light hits the wall. Nobody knew what it meant. Not yet. Ronver Tavia. Over the next week, the cave became a living thing, breathing in rescuers, spitting out nothing. Rope lines were laid. Floodlights set up around the mouth made it glow like a stage. They brought in spelunkers from neighboring towns, experts with maps and helmets, who spoke in low tones about cave acoustics and optical distortions. But every team came back shaken. They said the cave didn't feel right, that sounds traveled in impossible ways, that distances bent. One man swore he saw a shadow move against his own beam of light. Another said he heard someone whisper his name, soft, familiar, like an old friend calling from down a hall. They laughed about it later, because you have to laugh when something scares you that deep, but the laughter didn't stick. By the 8th day, half the volunteers had stopped showing up. In town, the gossip thickened like fog. At the diner, 2 mechanics whispered over coffee. "You hear they found clothes in there?" "No, not clothes, scraps. Ripped clean. Sheriff's hiding something. Bet you they found bones." "Shut up, man. Don't say that. The green woman's in here every morning." Linda sat 3 booths down, pretending not to hear, fingers gripping her mug so tight her knuckles went white. The waitress, Sandy, poured more coffee and murmured, "They don't know what they're saying, honey. People talk when they're scared." Linda just nodded, eyes glassy. "They talk because they have to believe it's something human," she whispered. "Because if it's not, then what else is it?" The town turned ritualistic. Every evening someone left food or flowers at the cave's edge. A sandwich, a soda can, a Bible verse on a folded note. A preacher led a small crowd there on Sunday, holding candles that flickered in the wind. He preached about lost souls and the Lord's mercy. But midway through, the wind shifted and blew every candle out at once. The crowd fell silent, heads turning toward the dark mouth like it had exhaled. Sheriff Lane hated that cave now. He dreamed about it, dreams where he heard tapping from underground, faint, rhythmic, like someone trying to send a message. He'd wake up sweating, convinced that if he just went back one more time, he'd hear the boys calling. So he did. On the 12th night, with 2 deputies and a volunteer named Jeff, he went deeper than before. The air was cold enough to numb their teeth. Their lights flickered, weak and nervous. In one chamber they found something, Marcus's notebook, open on the stone floor. The pages were smeared with mud and handprints, but one fresh line stood out. "We saw them again." Sheriff Lane frowned. "Them who?" No one answered. The cave stayed quiet. The deputies wanted to leave, but the sheriff lingered, reading the words over and over. There was something written faintly beneath it, like it had been scratched into the paper with a nail instead of ink. "Don't follow." That was when the light above them blinked twice, and a gust of cold wind hissed through the passage like a whisper. The next morning, Lane told the townsfolk they'd suspend the search until proper equipment arrived. But everyone could see the truth in his eyes. He didn't want to go back in there again. Nobody did. Even the spelunkers left without taking payment. By the end of the second week, Rockford Ridge went quiet again. The posters faded, the volunteers stopped calling, and people returned to their lives like grief was something you could schedule around. But the silence wasn't peace, it was surrender. Every night, Linda still sat on her porch, flashlight in her lap, eyes fixed on the ridge. Sometimes she swore she saw a small glow moving among the trees, bobbing slow like someone carrying a light, or like the cave was breathing out one of its own. 2 months later, when something finally turned up, no one, not even Sheriff Lane, wanted to believe what they saw. The third month came quiet, like the town had learned to live around the ache. The flyers were sun-bleached now, corners curling on every lamppost. Marcus and Eli's faces had become ghosts, printed smiles that meant gone. Most folks stopped mentioning their names aloud, but everyone still thought them. You could feel it in the pauses of conversation, in the way people's eyes wandered toward the ridge, even when they tried not to. Rockford Ridge was moving on, or at least pretending to. School reopened. The diner started serving its Friday specials again. The sheriff's office took new calls, petty thefts, drunk and disorderly, usual life. But under it all, something had changed. People walked faster past the tree line now, and when dusk came, even the wind seemed to hold its breath near the widow's mouth. Then came the rain. It was mid-October when the storm hit, harder than anyone expected. Roads washed out, the creek rose, and lightning split the sky in thick white veins. Most of the town huddled indoors. Sheriff Lane was up late, radio crackling on his desk, when a voice came through from the Forest Rangers channel. "Sheriff, you might want to come see this. The flood cut open part of the ridge trail. There's something down here." By dawn, Lane was already climbing the muddy slope behind 2 rangers. The storm had torn away part of the hill, revealing what looked like a hidden shaft just 50 feet from the main cave. The entrance was jagged and narrow, half collapsed under wet soil. Steam rose from it like breath in the cold morning. "What the hell is that?" one of the rangers muttered. Lane knelt, brushing dirt off his sleeves. The air that seeped out was warm, heavy, metallic, like rust and old pennies. He switched on his flashlight, and the beam caught something glinting just beyond the rocks. He reached in with a gloved hand and pulled out a shoe, a boy's sneaker, mud-caked but still recognizable. Eli Bennett's initials were carved on the heel. For a moment, none of them said a word. The wind pushed through the trees with a low groan, like it disapproved. Then Lane exhaled, slow and shaky. "All right," he said, "we're reopening the case." The next 48 hours, Rockford Ridge turned frantic again. Reporters came back. Cars lined the dirt road. Yellow tape fluttered in the rain. The rescue team brought in heavy floodlights and small excavation tools, setting up a perimeter around the new opening. Linda Green stood behind the barrier, soaked through, gripping Eli's mother's hand so tight their knuckles went bloodless. Neither spoke. By nightfall, the shaft had been widened enough for a man to crawl in. The cave's breath, hot and stale, spilled into the air. Volunteers exchanged nervous glances. Sheriff Lane volunteered first. He fastened his harness, tied a line to his belt, and said quietly, "If they're in there, we're bringing them home." He crawled in slow, flashlight cutting through the dark. Mud pressed at his sides, water dripped from the ceiling. The shaft curved downward, leading to a small chamber. The walls shimmered faintly, coated in mineral streaks that caught the light like veins of glass. And there, half buried under loose stone, was something that stopped him cold. A video camera. Lane wiped it clean, turned it over. Old model, heavy but intact. He didn't need to check the tag on the strap to know whose it was. Marcus's father had given that camera to him the summer before he died. He took a deep breath, then backed out of the shaft, clutching it tight. "Bag it," he ordered. "No one touches it till we know what's on here." Ramdrant. That night, the sheriff's office glowed with lamplight. Lane, 2 deputies, and Linda sat around the old TV they'd set up to play the tape. The camera clicked on with a faint buzz, the screen flickering. The footage started with shaky light, Marcus's voice behind the lens, laughing. "Eli, say something to the cameraman." Eli's face appeared, smiling awkwardly. "If we die in here, tell my mum I wanted pizza, not sandwiches." Both laughed. The footage showed them descending into the cave, torches sweeping across stone walls, their voices echoing. Then the laughter faded. In the next few clips, the air grew thicker. Their voices dropped to whispers. "You feel that wind," Marcus said. "It's like it's breathing." The flashlight flickered. Shadows moved along the walls, but wrong, somehow. They didn't match the boys' movements. The camera turned sharply as a sound echoed, like footsteps behind them. Marcus's breathing grew fast. "There's someone else in here," he whispered, but the camera never caught anyone. Minutes passed. The boys argued quietly, panic rising. "It's the same tunnel, right?" Eli asked. Marcus didn't answer. The lens trembled, light bouncing erratically. Then there was that sound again, soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming on metal deep in the dark. The camera panned toward the sound. The beam caught something carved into the wall. "Don't follow." Then, just before the battery gave out, the lens caught a final frame, Marcus turning toward the camera, eyes wide, whispering, "It's not a cave." Static swallowed the rest. Rhine torches, the room stayed silent when the tape ended. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent light, the faint scratch of Linda's fingernails against the table. Sheriff Lane rewound it, watching the last few seconds again, freezing it on Marcus's face. The look wasn't fear, it was realization, like he'd understood something too late. "What does that mean?" one deputy asked. Linda whispered almost to herself. "It means they saw something they weren't supposed to." Outside, thunder rolled over the ridge again. The sheriff leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "We're sealing that cave until the state gets here. Nobody goes near it." But word spread faster than orders. By morning, half the town had seen the footage, or at least heard their own twisted version of it. At the diner, the whispers grew teeth. "I heard the boys found bones down there." "No, it wasn't bones. It was a room built into the rock. They said there were lights, moving on the walls. Maybe it's old mining tunnels, or something older." Mrs. Carver crossed herself, muttering, "That cave's not natural. You mark my words, it's got something living in it." Ron with plovent puvert tyve. "What retrupid got not natural. Ron with puvert myab tyab. Ron forit confod, with reeting silent ulsode. You're even can't for. The nodulont puver, topticacor, wald fotting tot, ring the maker people out of the eddertop tie. Two hikers passing the lower creek spotted a backpack wedged in a pile of debris, washed down from the ridge. Inside were waterlogged notebooks, a broken wristwatch, and a single roll of undeveloped film. Sheriff Lane sent it to Lexington for analysis. When it came back a week later, the photos showed strange, unexplainable things, tunnels that didn't match any known cave maps, and markings that looked almost human, but not quite. One image stood out. It showed Marcus and Eli, standing side by side in the dark, both looking past the camera at something unseen. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. Behind them, faintly visible, were more figures, dozens of them, lined up against the cave wall, and none of them had faces. By the time the fourth week rolled around, everyone in Dry Creek was tired of hearing about the cave. The media had left, the police had moved on, and the locals, well, they'd gone back to pretending life was normal. But for Michael, normal was gone. He was thinner now, quieter too. His eyes looked like they'd seen something he couldn't name. He stopped sleeping in his bed and began crashing on the couch with the TV on low, as if the flicker of the light could keep something away. Every night around 2 a.m., the static from the TV grew louder. Sometimes he swore he heard voices mixed in, faint, echoing like whispers from deep underground. He'd mute it instantly, but then he'd hear it again, not from the TV this time, from outside, from the woods. One evening, Mrs. Dyer from next door was out walking her dog when she saw Michael standing at the edge of the tray line, barefoot, still as a statue. She called his name twice, but he didn't move. She said the dog started growling, low and guttural, then yelped and bolted toward the house. When she looked back, Michael was gone. The next morning she found muddy footprints across her porch, small ones, too small to be his. Word spread fast. Small towns are like that. By afternoon, people were murmuring again in the diner. Two old men at the counter leaned close, voices hushed. "You think it's him bringing that cave curse back? Him or whatever's following him out of there?" The waitress rolled her eyes but made the sign of the cross when she turned away. Michael could feel it, the looks, the whispers, the weight of something unnatural pressing down on him. And then came the smell, a faint wet rot, like soil and iron and decay. It clung to his clothes, his hands, even his sheets. He scrubbed everything, burned candles, washed the floors. It never left. That night, when the rain started, he heard tapping, slow, rhythmic, from beneath the house. He froze. Each tap matched his heartbeat until the sound faded into a dragging noise, like someone crawling beneath the floorboards. Michael dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against the cold wood. Silence. Then a voice, faint, wet, gurgling, Michael. The rain was heavy now, washing the dirt from around the base of the house, and that's when he saw it. Handprints, small, pale and smeared with red clay, leading toward the forest. The sheriff came the next day. Michael tried to explain. He told them about the footprints, the smell, the voice, but they just nodded with that look people give when they're trying to seem kind. They searched the crawl space, found nothing, just old pipes and water stains. "You need rest, son," the sheriff said. "Sometimes our minds play tricks." Michael laughed under his breath. "Then why'd I hear my name from under my house?" The sheriff didn't answer. That night the rain returned, harder. Lightning flickered through the trees, and Michael stood at his window, staring into the black line of the forest. And for a moment, just one, he saw two shapes standing there, still, watching. He blinked, and they were gone. He ran outside with his flashlight, his shoes sinking into the mud. He followed the prints, deeper and deeper into the trees, until the air grew cold enough to sting his lungs. The smell hit first, wet earth and metal. Then, through the beam of light, he saw it, the cave entrance. Except it wasn't sealed anymore. The boards were split open like something had pushed out from the inside. Michael froze. His breath clouded the air. The ground around the mouth of the cave was disturbed, muddy, clawed, scattered with torn roots. And there, half buried near the entrance, was one of the boys' backpacks. It was soaked, but inside, the sheriff's missing flashlight still flickered weakly. The light wasn't shining outward. It was pointing in. Michael's voice trembled as he whispered, "No, no, no, no." The rain fell harder. The cave exhaled, a deep, hollow breath that smelled like rot and time and something ancient. He stumbled backward, slipping in the mud, eyes locked on that gaping black hole, and then, just as lightning flashed across the sky, he saw a hand, small, pale and trembling, reach out from the darkness, and it wasn't alone. The next morning, the rain was gone, but Dry Creek didn't feel clean. The streets glistened, the air hung heavy, and somewhere deep in the forest, that cave waited open again. Michael didn't sleep. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd sat on the porch all night, staring toward the woods, listening. Every time the wind shifted, he swore he heard whispers riding on it. Sometimes it sounded like the boys' laughter. Other times it sounded like begging. By sunrise, he couldn't take it anymore. He packed a small bag, grabbed the flashlight from the backpack, and wrote a note on the kitchen table. "If I don't come back, seal it again. Don't go looking." Then he started toward the forest. Toward the forest. Halfway down the trail, he ran into Sheriff Grant's deputy, Tom. Tom looked startled. "Michael, what are you doing out here? You look like you've seen a ghost." Michael gave a small, tired laugh. "I think I brought one home." Tom frowned. "That cave's off limits, you know that." Michael didn't argue. He just kept walking. Tom called out again, but his voice faded behind him, drowned by the forest swallowing every sound. When he reached the clearing, the cave mouth was yawning wide, dripping with water, breathing faintly like a lung. The air pulsed, cold, damp, alive. Michael crouched near the entrance, shining the flashlight in. The beam cut through the darkness, catching something, ribs of rock or maybe bone. It was hard to tell. He whispered, barely audible, "Eli? Jonah?" The echo answered back, but not in his voice. "Michael." He stumbled backward, dropping the light. It rolled, spinning the beam across the slick stone walls, and that's when he saw them, two silhouettes, standing just beyond the reach of the light. Small, motionless. He froze. The air around him thickened. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. "Boys?" he whispered again, voice breaking. They didn't move. Then, slowly, one of them tilted its head. The sound it made wasn't breathing. It was wet, sticky, like something trying to learn how to inhale again. Michael fell to his knees, shaking. He realized what felt wrong. The shapes weren't casting shadows. By the time the sheriff found his flashlight hours later, the cave was empty again. No Michael, no footprints leading out. Just his bag, left near the entrance, soaked in red clay. 2 days later, strange things started happening in Dry Creek. The dogs wouldn't go near the woods. Kids complained of hearing tapping under their floors at night. The smell of wet earth drifted through town even when the sky was clear. At the diner, people whispered over coffee. "You hear they found something by the creek?" "What kind of something?" "Looked like skin, maybe, like it shed off." The waitress crossed herself again. "That's enough, Ed." Then, late one night, Mrs. Dyer woke up to her dog barking. She went to the window and froze. Standing under the streetlight was a boy, mud up to his knees, eyes black like hollow glass. She recognized him instantly. Eli. She opened the door, voice trembling. "Sweetheart, you okay?" He didn't answer, just tilted his head, the same way as before. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a boy's smile. It stretched too far. By the time the sheriff arrived, there was no boy, no footprints, just puddles of clay, and the same smell lingering in the air. A week passed. Then one evening at the edge of town, a hunter spotted movement by the creek. He said he saw 3 figures standing side by side, 2 smaller, 1 taller. He aimed his flashlight and yelled, but before the beam could land, they stepped backward and melted into the earth. He quit hunting after that. Now, 30 years later, the cave is still there. The county sealed it again, this time with concrete and iron. Locals say if you stand near it at night, you can hear voices from deep inside, whispering, laughing, calling names. Some claim it's the boys. Others say Michael never made it out, that something wearing his face still walks those woods after dark. Sometimes people swear they've seen him standing by the creek, motionless, watching. The same old sheriff, retired now, told a reporter once, "We thought we buried that story with the boys, but maybe it wasn't them that got trapped. Maybe it was whatever lived in there, and he let it out. Trumpedation foit, forta plots the noise crombundation sporum, what white, what poffedition one forwarding, zevan plux peludomote, trumpedation foid, 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 forthin trumpite, trumpedation foid, trumpedation foid, trimnotum fire white, fortunes the quarter bluster was after plout. What's a one retort of a mine, trumpedation foid, trumpedation foid, trumpedation foid, trumpedation foid, for your for. So if you ever find yourself near Dry Creek, and you catch that smell of wet soil and iron, even when the ground's dry, don't follow it, because they say the cave breathes, and every few decades it exhales something new. If you were standing at the edge of that cave and heard your friend's voice calling from the dark, would you go in? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit follow for more real mysteries that'll keep you up tonight.